Okay, I'm going to show you here the research that we're doing out here in Antarctica, and we're on Inexpressible Island, which is well known for its cold winds and storms, but we're here on a really nice day. Sun's out, light breeze, perfect. I am sitting here on a pebble concentration that is the remnants of an ancient penguin breeding colony. It's probably 3,000 or 4,000 years old based on other sites that have been documented here on this island. And you'll notice that it's the surface pebbles, which are all the size that penguins would select for nesting, have dark colored lichens on them, and that's a good indication that this colony is pretty old. And what we do is we remove these surface rocks and we put them here aside so that when we're done excavating, we will backfill the pit and place these rocks back on the surface, and then it's hard to tell where we've been excavating. So we'll start here and see what we have below on this particular site. And now removed the surface pebbles, no sediments in those pebbles. We've come down to the top of the ornithogenic sediments, and Ashley has already found eggshell and feathers. I'm going to point to that right here. So there's good preservation here, and I'm holding in my hand a small feather as well. So the very dry, cold environment here is quite conducive for this kind of preservation. These remains could be thousands of years old, but still look like they were deposited just yesterday. Our next step will be to screen all these sediments in 5 centimeter levels, saving the finer sediments to sort later, and get all the organic tissues we can that are preserved in the sediments. We'll continue down every 5 centimeters until we reach the bottom of the ornithogenic soils. See, as we scrape back the sediments, it exposes the reddish colored ornithogenic soil that contains all of the eggshell and hopefully bones that we can use for radiocarbon dating of this site. It's also very dry and dusty, so another indication that it's a fairly old site. The screens, we're saving all the screen sediment full of eggshell, small pieces of eggshell that you can see there, and we will sort through that later and obtain a lot more of the organic remains that way. Just like in archaeology. If we find any larger bones or pieces of tissue or feather in this top screen, we'll take that out. Sorting it here in the field saves a lot of weight in bringing this back to the lab when we don't really need to. This screen, though, you see is the window screen size, and there's lots of pieces of eggshell, maybe some feather in there, and so we want to save all of this and sort through that more carefully in the lab. And then the finest section, we'll resort this out later in the lab as well after we wash the sediments, make it nice and clean so we can pick out any fish bones, otoliths that might be preserved in there that represent the hard parts of penguin prey. Okay, we've just reached the bottom of this site, and you can tell we've reached the bottom because there's a distinct change in color and soil texture. There's just fine sediments, darker in color than the reddish ornithogenic soils. There's no more pebbles, and so this represents the natural terrace that was here. I'm also getting large rocks, so that's another indication we're at the bottom. And so we only have one level, but we've recovered lots of eggshell, some feathers, some small pieces of bone, and we'll be able to get a radiocarbon date on this site and analyze the ancient sediments as well. So next we will take some photos, backfill the pit, put the surface rocks back on there, and we'll show you one last view of the site at that time. Okay, we've now removed all the sediments that were on the tarp and have placed them back into the pit, as you see there. We use that tarp next to the pit to protect the ground surface that's undisturbed from our excavations. We didn't have to scoop up any of that material to refill the pit. We just drug it over and dumped it back into the pit. Now we'll replace the surface pebbles that have all the lichens, and you won't be able to see very well where we excavated. Okay, and there we have it. We've put the stones back on the surface and our excavation area is barely visible. So this is how we do it. This is how we excavate these sites. Sometimes they go 6, 7, 8 levels depending on the size of the mound and the length of the occupation. This one was shallow, so only the one level, but still a very old site. Now we can move on to another site.